Your phone erupts at 3 a.m. Not a text, not an alarm. That sound. That one that makes your stomach drop. Emergency alerts. You grab your phone, squinting at the screen, and it says, remain calm, stay indoors, await further instructions. And in every zombie movie, show, game, and comic ever made, that message means the exact same thing. You're already cooked. The government just told you they lost. See, we've watched this play out hundreds of times. The grainy TV broadcast in Night of the Living Dead, Fedra's speakers blasting through Boston in The Last of Us, Korean news anchors in Train to Busan calling mass infections riots, while people are literally eating each other on live television. Those neurocamps scattered across Days Gone's wasteland, 28 weeks later's District 1 going from success story to massacre in under an hour. Every single time, the pattern repeats. Institutions don't fail because they're run by some random villain twirling his mustache. They fail because they're designed for a world that moves at the speed of confirmations and data, while outbreaks move at the speed of fear and panic. The part that every zombie outbreak shares, no matter the universe, tone, or budget, there's always a gap, a lethal gap between when the threat becomes real and when institutions are willing to admit it's real. And that gap is where a lot of people die. The pattern is almost everywhere once you see it. Governments need data, they need verification, chain of command, legal liability, international optics, budget approvals, blah blah blah. The list goes on forever, and all of that takes time. Every meeting, every conference call, every let's wait for more information and survey the area before we make a decision costs valuable minutes. They need to make sure they're not overreacting, not causing unnecessary panic, and not tanking markets or triggering mass hysteria over what might just be insulated incidents. So they wait. Outbreaks don't start with explosions or sirens. They start with uncertainty. While officials wait for confirmation, outbreaks multiply. While experts debate causes, the situation on the ground is already escalating beyond containment. Every second of bureaucratic hesitation is another bite or another person that just doesn't make it. Another exponential jump in the curve of shit hitting the fan. Zombie flicks return to this same split reality over and over. One world exists inside conference rooms and press conferences, where language is softened and decisions are delayed. Another world exists outside, where people are boarding up doors, watching neighbors turn, and realizing the rules have already changed. These two realities occupy the same moment in time, but only one of them determines who survives. Night of the Living Dead captured this decades ago. Calm voices on TV arguing about radiation or space probes, while the dead are literally breaking into homes. That contrast never went away. It evolved. World War Z formalized it with the Great Denial, where governments knowingly pushed a fake solution, not because it works, but because it preserves the illusion of stability. Phalanx isn't medicine, it's reassurance. And reassurance buys just enough time for the outbreak to spread unchecked. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook we saw with COVID, just dialed up to apocalyptic levels. By the time leadership accepts this isn't a manageable disease, entire regions are infected. What makes this failure consistent, ironically, isn't stupidity, it's structure. Every attempt to manage optics instead of reality sacrifices neighborhoods, then cities, and then ultimately regions. When decisive action finally arrives, it's usually aimed at the version of the outbreak that existed days ago, not the one currently unfolding. Wreck, Left 4 Dead, and Black Summer all understand this from different angles. By the time formal responses show up, it's either too late to matter or completely misaligned with the threat. Protocols designed for normal disease control become pointless. Quarantines lock people in with the damn infection. Left 4 Dead's world is littered with evidence of this same timeline. CETA, the Centers for Epidemic Disease Action, tries quarantines. The military tries rescues. Scientists try vaccines. But the green flu mutates too fast and spreads too wide. In-game graffiti tells the real story. CETA lied, Helicopter 4 is not coming, and evac zones overrun yesterday. Some stories skip the response phase entirely, not out of laziness, but honestly, we already know what it is. Black Summer drops you into that exact aftermath. The show puts you into a world where government is already just scattered people with guns and uniforms. Crossed doesn't waste a single panel on institutional response because there isn't really one to show. Society doesn't crumble in that comic. It snaps. Patient Zero in the UK spreads to 2 officers, then explodes outwards. But Crossed Badlands, hence this wasn't even the origin, and that it hit multiple locations simultaneously, and the case that we saw in UK was just the first one documented. Within days, roads belong to the infected. The comic jumps straight from normal life to aftermath because it knows the truth every zombie narrative knows. The window for meaningful institutional response is so narrow that by the time officials admit there's a crisis, you're already living in the ruins of their hesitation. But okay, let's say the government does respond quickly. Let's say they get the alerts out, mobilize resources, issue evacuation orders, and the rest of it. That's often when the body count explodes, because mass evacuation during an outbreak has one ugly flaw. It concentrates risk instead of removing it. You take a population that was spread across homes and neighborhoods and compress it into the same few checkpoints, whether that's highways, bridges, or airports. Infrastructure designed to move people efficiently becomes a toxic funnel the moment even one infected person enters the flow. The mechanics are pretty consistent across most zombie movies and shows. Evacuation mixes infection states. Some people are healthy, some people are symptomatic, and then you got people hiding symptoms because they're terrified of being left behind, making it even more difficult for people that are healthy and trying to get out of Dodge. Screening can't scale. Checkpoints don't fail because nobody tried. They fail because the math is impossible. Thousands of people sweating in heat, fear, and overcrowding look sick even when they aren't. And the truly infected can blend in until they turn at the worst possible moment, trapped inside a line, a train car, or even a plane. That's why these escape routes behave like pressure cookers. The system forces strangers into close contact, slows movement to a crawl, and turns every delay into a transmission multiplier. World War Z shows this at every level. Airports and borders collapse under sheer volume, and even the successful version, Jerusalem, fails because its success attracts more people than the system can safely absorb. Gates open, crowds pour in, noises rise, and the city's own relief becomes the very thing that brings the horde. The safe zone doesn't fall because the wall was weak. It fell because evacuation concentrated humanity into a target. I Am Legend takes the same idea and adds a worst case pivot point. When control slips, the exit plan becomes an execution plan. The Brooklyn Bridge evacuation looks like order, soldiers, barriers, and scanning, until one wrong scan causes panic and the only option left is to blow up the whole area, killing civilians along with the threat. The message that sends is unforgettable. If the math turns against you, you're basically disposable. Apocalypse Z visualizes the aftermath. Highways gridlock into permanent graveyards. Once the front of the line stops, whether that's accidents, roadblocks, overwhelmed checkpoints, everyone behind it becomes trapped in metal boxes with nowhere to run. Train to Busan literally compresses that nightmare into a moving tube. A train becomes a rolling quarantine experiment, each station a new mixing chamber. And then the worst I think of all is situations like in Quarantine 2, aircrafts becoming a sealed moving box 30,000 feet in the air with nowhere to hide or run. In Days Gone, the narrow checkpoints and refugee camps that weren't meant to process, screen, and relocate people become overrun gravesites because density guarantees exponential spread once the first infected slips through. In Paradise, the series shows the social side of the same collapse. Controlled movement depends on trust, and once fear spikes above trust, procedures just stop mattering. That's why movies like Alive hit so hard as the counterexample. The main character is safest when he refuses the crowd logic, controls his own space, and avoids places where panic and infection are most concentrated. So the government evacuations fail. Fine. Bring in martial law. Soldiers with guns, curfews, checkpoints, shoot on sight orders, all the good stuff. That'll hold the line, right? Except martial law has a fatal assumption baked into it, that soldiers will keep following orders even when those orders cross moral lines that can't be uncrossed. That the chain of command will hold when commanders start asking 18-year-olds with rifles to do things that will haunt them forever and cause massive levels of trauma. And in every zombie story, that assumption goes out the window fast. Here's the thing about soldiers. They're not robots. They're people with families, consciences, and breaking points. You can train someone to follow orders under fire. You can drill discipline until it's reflex. But you can't make their brain immune to the moment when command says, kill civilians to save the mission, or abandon the people we promised to protect. That's when morale doesn't just crack, it basically gives up. And when it does, the chain of command doesn't slowly erode, it collapses all at once, usually from the inside. The Walking Dead's Operation Cobalt was a gnarly example. National Guard units established safe zones, distributed aid, and built trust in Atlanta. Civilians believed in the mission because soldiers behave like protectors. Then the order flips. Cities are written off with napalm. The same soldiers who promise safety are told to erase the people they've gathered. Day of the Dead isolates soldiers and scientists underground, supposedly to preserve humanity's future. Instead, resentment replaced cooperation. The soldiers saw the scientists as pointless risk, and the scientists see the soldiers as unstable crashouts. With no shared belief in the mission, authority became personal and then violent. The bunker falls not because defenses fail, but because trust just wasn't there. 28 days later shows a more isolated oversight. A remaining military unit maintains order only until it realizes no higher command is coming back. With no external accountability and no future objective, authority becomes a toxic dictatorship where promises were made at the expense of other people already dealing with the world going to shit. The uniform stops representing order and starts enabling abuse. 28 weeks later shows the same collapse, just on a bigger scale. District 1 operated as a functional military occupation. Power, housing, controlled movement. When the virus re-enters because of those damn kids, command doesn't adapt. It aborts everything almost immediately. Code Red authorized cutthroat killing. Snipers firing into crowds, and entire neighborhoods are burned. The military doesn't lose control. It applies control so aggressively that it destroys the population and all their hard work. Planet Terror and Resident Evil both kind of show light on when outbreaks originate inside military or corporate secrecy. In Planet Terror, containment efforts escalated chaos because force is used to hide the failures. In Resident Evil, Black Ops style research and government collusion delay truth until annihilation becomes the only option. Soldiers execute orders built on lies, turning the military into a brutal evidence-erasing tool rather than a rescue force. Some worlds barely show martial law at all. The comic book series Crossed skipped it almost entirely because organized responses collapse just too fast to matter. Armed forces fragment immediately, not after defeat, but because the social framework they depend on disintegrates into thin air. The sadness makes this collapse unavoidable to watch. Leadership attempts to project control during a live broadcast. Then security personnel turns mid-address. Authority doesn't transition. It gets ripped apart on camera in front of everyone watching. Martial law only functions if the chain of command survives the first moral crisis. Zombie outbreaks pretty much make sure they don't. At that point, the gun is a symbol of control. It's a sign that the system has nothing left to offer except force. Every time officials lie, delay, or soften the truth, they're stealing preparation time from everyone else. Leaders worry that honesty will create panic. What they don't understand is that half-truths guarantee an even worse result later on when people realize they've been risking their families on just bad intel. Train to Busan hits this point right on the nail. Early broadcasts call incidents quote-unquote riots and disturbances, not infection, not an outbreak. Riots. Like this is civil unrest and something manageable. Passengers on the train are watching phone videos of people eating each other while news anchors are still calling it mass attacks by rioters. The obvious disregard and ignorance breaks trust faster than any virus. By the time official channels admit what's happening, nobody believes them anyway, because they lied when honesty mattered the most. World War Z's phalanx vaccine is institutional dishonesty at a global scale. Governments know it doesn't work, but they push it anyway, because markets need confidence. Borders need to stay open, economies need to keep moving. All hell is breaking loose, but they're worried about the stock market. That's the exact bullshit I'm talking about when it comes to delayed responses and informational trust from higher ups in the government. So people line up for shots that do nothing, believing they're protected, and they keep traveling, keep gathering, keep spreading the infection. Then the actual truth comes out, and public trust doesn't just break apart, it damn near goes to non-existent. And once people stop believing the government will save them, they stop following any rules. And that's when the madness really starts happening. Wreck and quarantine trap people without explanation. Residents are locked in a building and told to stay inside for their safety. That's the entire briefing. No details about what they're facing, no guidance on transmission or symptoms, and no timelines for a resolution. Contagion and the crazies show you this failure in a more grounded, realistic context. In Contagion, officials try to manage markets and public good, which delays hard measures like travel bans or mandatory vaccines. Every day of let's not overreact is exponential spread. The crazies goes even darker. A biological weapon contaminates a water supply, and the government's response is total information lockdown and military containment. No warnings to residents, no explanations, just troops pulling up and rolling in, which means infected and uninfected are mixed together with no real way to tell the difference. And the people who might have cooperated are now running because armed soldiers are hunting them without explanation. What would you do? Now, if you survive the evacuation, dodge martial law, and somehow reach a functioning safe zone, congratulations. You've just entered the most dangerous place in the apocalypse, because safety zones don't fail from outside pressure. They fail from what success attracts. The Walking Dead turned this into a pattern. Atlanta, the CDC, the prison, Woodbury, Hilltop, every safe zone becomes a stage for power struggles, betrayals, paranoid leaders making catastrophic calls, Negan's saviors, the governor's brutality, and Alpha's crazy-ass whisperers. The walkers outside the fence barely matter in these examples because the people inside keep destroying each other. Zombies don't breach Alexandria. Rick's group's conflicts with other survivors is what ultimately leads it to destruction. Every official decision is about yesterday's problem. That's the bureaucratic lag. Policy is incremental. Stage 1 advisory, Stage 2 restrictions, and Stage 3 emergency power. Infection is exponential. We're talking Stage 1 person, Stage 2 neighborhood, and Stage 3 the entire city, all in one weekend. You can't out paperwork an infection. Left 4 Dead's green flu outpaces every institutional response. CETA tries quarantines, militaries try rescues, and scientists, I guess, try vaccines. But the virus mutates too fast and spreads too wide. You're not fighting yesterday's outbreak. You're fighting an organism that's evolved 3 times since you started drafting the response. Night of the Living Dead gives you contradictory broadcasts because different agencies aren't even synchronized and on the same level with reality. National voices say stay calm and await rescue. Local sheriffs issue shoot on sight orders, and some stations tell you to barricade yourself at home. The people in the farmhouse get all this information and none of it helps because every broadcast is reacting to data that's already hours old. The government phase of an outbreak is brutally short. If you map it out, you get maybe 72 hours before institutional control just shits the bed and collapses completely. 0 to 24 hours, weird news clips, social media videos, phases like quote-unquote isolated incidents, and then alarm systems say don't panic. Officials are still gathering information. Then 24 hours to 48 hours later, checkpoints appear. Roadblocks in some neighborhoods, normal traffic in others. First big mistake happens. Shooting at evacuation sites. Hospitals overrun. Supply chains systematically breaking. Emergency numbers naturally get jammed. You can still get gas, but the gas stations are being mobbed and looted. 48 hours to 72 hours later, hospitals are full of infected. Grocery stores stripped, electricity is flickering, and law enforcement fragments. Some cops are still patrolling. Others have straight up abandoned their post. Banks close and ATMs ain't working. Flights are getting canceled and military units recalled. That's when you know the state isn't coming back. Apocalypse shows you this compression. A lawyer in Spain watches his country collapse in days. Banks close, borders slam shut, and military convoys head to unknown destinations. Within a week, entire nations have basically lost territorial control. The main character survives largely because he stops trusting institutions early, doesn't wait for official guidance, and doesn't follow evacuation orders. He ends up pivoting to self-reliance before most people, and his survival rate is much better because of it. So why does the government always fail? It's not incompetence, it's design. Institutions are optimized for legitimacy, clear chains of responsibility, minimal mistakes, and an appearance of control. Those are features we're allotted in peacetime. They become fatal weaknesses when threats grow faster than your Zoom meeting can be scheduled. Zombie outbreaks punish hesitation and visibility. Every strength centralized around command, public communication, and large-scale infrastructure becomes a vulnerability the second the exponential curve starts climbing.